Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to continue our examination of Comix book. We're up to number 3. This, of course, was the bizarre, hard-to-believe publication that Marvel Comics put out, trying to get some of the money from the underground comics readers, and it failed miserably. But it's got some great shit in it. So we start off with a beautiful Dennis Kitchen cover, who's also the editor, of course, and really funny stuff. And I love this little Golden Age type cover design here with a bunch of the characters from within. Inside front covers by Joel Beck. It's called The Rise and Fall and Rise and Fall and Rise and Fall of the American Revolution. We see this old hippie who's talking about how college campuses were once pretty square, and then in the 60s, the Bohemians kind of took over, and pretty soon it was, hippie land, and there was protests, and of course the cops come around and beat them all down. But at the end, he asks, what's with today's kids? And we see this father berating his son. He says, why don't you go out and blow up a draft board or insult me and mom or smash the establishment? He's like, Dad, I just want to study to become a doctor. Do you mind? So it says at the end, you can't beat the system. So everything's cyclical. I imagine this father would have really blown his top. Probably 6 years later, this kid's going to vote for Ronald Reagan, We have the little editorial first page here with some more nice, funny Dennis Kitchen drawings. And we have the first letters page. This is kind of interesting. There's a letter from Robert Crumb. And Robert Crumb is kind of dissing them. And he says, your rates are really good from what I hear. It's mighty tempting, but I'll never sell out. Not me. And then he wishes luck to Dennis Kitchen. So apparently, Comix book had really good rates for the time. If you were an underground cartoonist, it was really hard to pass up the money. Of course, a lot of underground cartoonists were all about free expression, and they couldn't be totally free, published in this Marvel comic magazine. So a lot of them are, that's why S. Clay Wilson is in here. A lot of artists are in here, great underground cartoonists, because even though the money was good, they didn't want to sell out. But I like that Art Crumb takes the time to write in. And he mentions that he really does not like the R. Meltzer gossip column. And it's funny, a lot of these letters, almost 90% of them are like, that's terrible, that column, get rid of it, which I agree with. And we get a letter from Bill Griffith, and he says, if there's an audience for watered-down, crippled underground comics, you'll corner them, but it won't last. Crap never does. But then look at this, guys. Bill Griffith's on the back cover. It's just a reprint. He allowed him to reproduce, but it's kind of funny that he's biting the hand that feeds him. The letter pages continue on page 28. We'll get to that when we get to it. So we start off with Dr. Future by Peter Poplaski. This is amazingly odd strip. We looked at Peter Poplaski about a year ago. He did that Quagmire comic. And he's got this amazing slick style. I mean, he could have worked for Warren Publications. He could have worked for Marvel and DC probably. I mean, just amazingly slick artwork. But he barely drew. He pretty much just worked for Kitchen Sink Press. He was some kind of function there. And it's kind of a shame, because this is pretty great. So basically, Dr. Future, he's, I don't know, he's almost like this weird Doctor Strange-like character. And this guy bursts into his office and he says, you gotta help me, please. I gotta know what's in store for me. I'll pay anything. And Dr. Future says, I don't want your money. I want your heart. And this is interesting too, this comic, every page has this logo on it. Dr. Future sees all. part of the design of the page is this logo, Dr. Future Knows All, Dr. Future Tells All. Never really seen that in a comic, kind of odd. So we see all of these little cages with these cartoony little hearts captured in them. And Dr. Future removes the guy's heart, and he directs him to this pinball machine, which will show him his future. There's a screen on it where he'll view the events of his life that are coming up. And the last scene he sees, we can hear the dialogue. It's no use. We've done all we can. He'll be a vegetable for the rest of his life. So he breaks down in sorrow, seeing his fate. And Dr. Future says, you cannot escape the truth. And he says, oh yeah, well, I got a gun. Man, look at this art. This is some nice stuff. And he realizes that he can't face the future. So instead, he just shoots himself in the head. Later at the hospital, we see the doctors talking about how, yeah, we barely saved him, but he'll be a vegetable for the rest of his life. And then we see the guy trapped on the strands of fate. And Dr. Future is just looking on with no emotion. Dr. Future, game over. Very odd story. Kind of interesting, too, for comics book, because almost all the comics in here are like gags, you know, kind of funny. Except for Panthea, of course, by Trina Robbins, which here's the 3rd chapter. So Panthea's in Morocco with her, well, she doesn't know it, but he's basically her abductor. He's tricked her into thinking that he's a friend. And he says, I got to go meet someone, baby. And he meets this really rich guy. And he says, oh, Panthea, I must have her. If she is, as you describe, should be the perfect addition to my harem. And the abductor guy, I forget his name. He's got a weird name. He kind of flashes back. So I guess he had sex with Panthea. We didn't see this earlier. So he's kind of, totally tricked her. Little does he know that we see a woman outside the window in Islamic robes. It's Panthea. She's hearing this whole story. And the rich guy says that should be a perfect addition to his harem. He has the strangest harem in the world. Everyone's unique. He's got a mermaid. He's got a unicorn lady, a bearded lady. So Panthea would be perfect for it. So Panthea runs away, runs back to the hotel room. When her abductor gets there, he sees that she's flown the coop and she took his airline ticket to San Francisco. Meanwhile, on a plane to San Francisco, we see Panthea and she says, maybe I'll be free in this strange new place. But there's some woman, the seat behind her, who says, your disguise doesn't fool me, Panthea. We can use you. So we'll find out what she's all about soon. This next one is by Robert Armstrong, Ozzy and Lotta, them Love Generation Lovebirds in Mystic Madness. So Lotta's playing with her Ouija board. She kind of believes in all that hokum. And she tells her boyfriend, Ozzy, that the Ouija board says they have no future. And he's like, that's just silly. Come on. She looks in her crystal ball. And so he gets out his magic 8-ball. And she gets really mad. She says, there you go, making fun of me again. I'm sick of your cruelty and your ridicule. I'm fed up. See you later, shithead. And she leaves. So he asks the magic 8-ball, has she really gone? And it says, don't bet on it. So meanwhile, Lotta very angrily goes to her friend's house. She says, Clutch, I've left Ozzy. I need someone to talk to. Clutch is very happy to hear this news. He's obviously held a torch for Lotta for a while. So as fast as he can, he shaves, puts on nice clothes, really cleans himself up. And he starts basically feeding her joints. and hoping to get her loose enough that he can make a pass at her. But she's got a really high tolerance, so she just keeps puffing away, complaining about Ozzy. And like 20 joints later, Clutch starts thinking, damn, this stuff's expensive. Can she possibly be worth all this? Meanwhile, back at the apartment, Patty, Lotta's friend, shows up looking for Lotta, and Ozzy tells her what happened. And she says, oh yeah? And she has this look on her face. And they're both looking at each other. And he looks at the magic 8-ball, and it says, definitely not. So he just tosses the 8-ball out the door, and they have sex. And so back at Clutch's place, Clutch is passed out from smoking all that pot. Lotta looks at his tarot cards, and the tarot cards tell her that she was mistaken. So she runs back to her place, and she trips on this magic 8-ball, the one that Ozzy threw away. She says, this must be a sign. I'll consult it. Does Ozzy still want to make love? Definitely yes. And as she's walking into their apartment door, she says, boy, what a nice surprise for him. That's a really fun story. In 3 pages, 4 pages? That's be a nice little short film or something. Now we have a beautiful Kim Deitch story, The Fickle Freak. And this is a carnival setting. We see Bev, the bearded lady. She's totally in love with Emil, the human pincushion. But he's totally in love with Celia, the circus sword swallower. And in an attempt to win over Emil, she shaves her beard off. And he could care less. He's totally gaga over Celia. All her attempt does is get her fired, because a bearded lady without a beard isn't very employable. Meanwhile, a clown runs up with a telegram. And it basically tells Bev that she inherited some land in the county over next door. All of a sudden, Emil has a surprising change of heart, and he's being all sweet on Bev. He wants in on this inheritance. But it turns out that the inheritance is just a cemetery plot. That's all she got. So Emil goes right back to Celia. And of course, Bev is saddened and outraged. And she picks up a knife and tries to stab Emil. Stabs him a bunch of times. But she forgets that he's a human pincushion. So he's used to such abuse. And all he does is say, hey, cut it out, will you? You're ruining the material. The bitter end. Love stinks. Just another great Deitch story. Here we have a one-pager, Barefoots by Howard Cruz. So unfunny. Once again, these are just terrible strips. This is Leslie Carbaga, The Abduction of Dot Darling. And I think this is based on a true story. I'm sure they changed a few things. So we see this young woman, Dot Darling. She's still in high school, but she has stars in her eyes. She wants to be a Hollywood star. Her father doesn't like the idea. He's like, you got to stay in school and get an education. She doesn't listen, and she goes to this agency, a talent agency, to see if she can make it. The secretary, with this very insidious look, says, ooh, you're just the type Mr. Brooks is looking for. So she meets Mr. Brooks, and she's got big dreams in her head of starring in a movie. But he sends her to meet this producer. It's in a hotel room, and when she opens the door, he's half naked. And he's like, what, you're here for an interview? I thought you were the girl from the agency sent over for my afternoon screwing. And she slugs him in anger, takes a taxi back to Brooks' office, and gives him the business. And he says, who do you think you are? You signed a contract. If you read the fine print, basically, I own you now. And one of his goons grabs her. And then there's this guy here. I think his name is just, they call him Moron. They say Moron. Put Miss Darling with the other young hopefuls, and he laughs evilly. So Moron brings her to this room, and all these other women are in the same situation. They're basically sex slaves. They are forced to have sex with Hollywood types. And Dot, though, she's not having it. She riles up the girls. She's like, come on, we outnumber those guys. We can escape. Let's put our heads together. We got the element of surprise. Little does she know that Brooks has a closed circuit televideo machine, and he hears the whole thing. So he tells his goon that you've got to separate Dot from the others. She's a bad influence. Look at this great panel here. Just the books on the bookshelf, how well drawn they are. It's a really amazing little piece of art there. So the goon throws her in this closet. But I guess Dot's exhortations to the other girls, they worked. Because when Moron brings their lunch, they conk him on the head. Meanwhile, in Brooks's office, he informs Dot that she's going to be sold off to a wealthy Cuban industrialist. And he even hires this hypnotist to make her docile for the trip, so she doesn't try to escape. And it works. It looks like she's totally under his spell. At that moment, the women who are now free break into the office. They knock out the goon. They grab the hypnotist. And one of them grabs Brooks and says, you dirty dog. That's what you are, a dog. Dot responds to her companion's suggestion, since she's under hypnosis, and she starts thinking she's a dog. She goes, bow wow. And they're like, Dot, snap out of it. Arf. And the women call the police. Man, I really like this art, especially for the setting. Like a story set in the 30s. Man, Leslie Carbaga, that's their meat. So here we see the actual article. Miss Dot Darling was instrumental in the uncovering of a Hollywood prostitution ring. And they call it Brooks' Love Market. She was pretty. And now we see her back at home. And her father says, the film studios have been calling up all day. They saw your picture in the paper. You have my permission if you want to pursue this. And she says, nah, Dad, I'm pretty content just selling grit door to door. Grit's that newspaper that kids used to sell. It was like the national newspaper. On the Job, True Stories of Workaday Drama by Skip Williamson. This is a kind of autobiographical. Skip Williamson, I believe, was like a art editor or assistant art editor at Gallery Magazine, which was a porno rag in the 70s and probably 80s too. And this is basically just about how chaotic it is in an office like this. And we see the editor, and his job is a nightmare. All he wants is the next issue to come out, but like his employees are fucking closets. They're snorting cocaine at their drawing boards. He's just constantly frazzled, this guy. It's like herding cats, you know? Look how great this cartooning is, though. God, that's fun shit. I love the way he draws the editor. I think that's Skip Williamson drawing himself, because he says he's the art editor. And just more chaos ensues, and he's just losing his shit. But then the new issue comes out, and the editor's totally thrilled. My agonies disappeared like vapors in the wind, he says. At last, I got my magazine out. And then you see the magazine's called Sleazy Vomit Monthly. But he's so proud of himself, you know. We have another Joel Beck one-pager, Junkie in a Gray Flannel Suit. And this is just a very timely joke, because it's about the gas shortage. And there was a meat shortage in the 70s, too. I didn't know that as a kid. I guess my parents were well off enough that it didn't affect us. But apparently it's hard to buy meat. So we see this guy in an alley selling this contraband gas and meat to this kind of yuppie guy. This issue's portrait is about Kim Deitch. Kind of a nice article, just talking about his life and his career so far. And it continues onto this page. And then we have the rest of the letters. Mark Estrin wrote in, who he wrote that first Underground Comics book, a book about Underground Comics, I should say, back in like 73 or something. Next, we have another Kim Deitch story, Waldo in Penny Pinchers. We see Waldo on his way to visit his friend, Dr. Bruno von Bowser. He's an astronomer. And on the way up his path, he sees a penny on the ground, but he says, that's not even worth the time. It's a penny. So when he gets there, his friend's very excited. The doctor says, look in the telescope. I've discovered alien life. But when Waldo looks in, he doesn't see anything. Meanwhile, in the heavens above, we see the aliens in this little UFO. And they're like Scottish aliens. And they're wearing tartan and speaking in Scottish accents. And so later on, after 4 beers and 3 joints, Waldo says goodnight and leaves. The aliens talk about how they've located a first-class ore supply. That's why they're on Earth. And we see them getting closer to Dr. Von Bowser's home. And on the way out, Waldo sees that penny again. And he says, I should take it. A penny saved is a penny earned. And the aliens freak out, and they're like, he's taking our ore. And they zap him with a freeze ray. And so they zip around. It turns out that it's a very tiny little UFO. And Waldo doesn't even see it. And they grab the penny and take off to space. When Waldo comes to, the penny's disappeared. As far as he knows, nothing happened. And the aliens are all happy, laughing at Waldo in his confusion. Waldo's such a great comic character, just so classic. Tomorrow on Parade, Dead End Morbidity of No Significance by Steve Stiles. So look at this art, man. This is like some Wally Wood shit. Steve Stiles really could draw. So I guess there was a nuclear war, and I guess life goes on even after a nuclear war. We see this couple leaving their bunker, and they're obviously heading for someplace. Apparently this is a very scary world. They've both got zap guns. They're cautiously walking through the rubble, afraid that someone will attack them. They freak out just from seeing a frog, because they're so jumpy. And then we see they eventually make it to this other bunker entrance. So then the narrator tells us that 2021, life isn't so bad. They've got rubber sidewalks, electric dancing radios, and they also have this thing. They have these local panels of government experts to tell everyone what to do and give them advice. So we see these guys. They're down in that bunker, these 4 wise elders. And when the couple takes off their helmets, we realize that they're mutates. They look like these cute little tiger bear cubs. And they ask the board, they say, is love real? That's their question. So after pontificating and cogitating on it for a while, they come to the conclusion that love is not real. And all of a sudden, the male, the boyfriend, gets furious, and he pulls out a gun. I like this here. It says, no violence in this panel. We hate violence. Instead, here's a picture of Ed, the smiling lumberjack, sniffing a flower. But when all the carnage is done, the couple look down and they realize that all the elders are robots. And then we cut away. We see this dude. He's watching this whole thing on a telescreen. And he says, those robots will be easily replaced. And soon, I, the Silver Scorpion, will be the rightful ruler of the universe. Then it cuts away again, a double pullback. Hey, you kids. And we see this like mystic Swami type who's floating. He's so enlightened. Even the little kids are pretty enlightened. He says, for shame, wasting lesson time, eavesdropping on our insectoid forefathers in the valley. No buts. Get back to work. And the kids get back to work levitating rocks. So it's such a weird ending, the double pullback. Both almost like non sequiturs. Like, this has nothing to do with the story, and then this has nothing to do with that. I almost wish it went on for 4 more pages. And they kept pulling back. But really well drawn stuff. I mean, so many panels in here are great. Here we have Lee Mars doing The Bottle Shop. Lee Mars did Pudge Girl Blimp in the 70s for Star Reach, and then later on became a mainstream comic book writer. Did Viking Prince for DC and a handful of other ones. She also did a lot of sci-fi strips for like heavy metal. So the narrator of the story is a young woman, and she rents an apartment from this old woman above her curio shop. And the pride and joy of this old woman is her demons in a bottle, or monsters in a bottle, whatever they're called. And she dotes on them and feeds them. So the apartment's not so nice, but, you know, whatever. She doesn't have a lot of money. And so 2 months later, the old lady invites her for some tea. And as the months go on, they kind of become friends, having coffee every day. And the old woman has some colorful stories, but she says at least the first 2 or 3 times. So I guess this old woman just repeats herself. She's old, you know. And so one day when they're drinking hot cocoa, the young woman says, "Oh man, I wish we had some marshmallows." And the old woman does a little razzle-dazzle, tweedle-dum-fiddle-foo, and these mushrooms appear. Of course, the young woman is freaked out. And the landlady says, "Oh, my secret's out. I'm actually a witch. But I'm not a scary witch. I pretty much just do good deeds. I'm harmless." So the woman's like, "Okay, if you say so." Still a little weird to her. But then one night she comes to her apartment and it's beautiful. The old woman, grateful for her company, I guess, totally made her apartment nice with magic. She also gets a job promotion. She's rising up in her field. And she also seems to be very popular with men. Basically, she's living a charmed life because the old lady is casting spells for her. But she cannot stand her anymore. She just keeps repeating her stories, and the young woman's going crazy. So she starts avoiding the landlady. And one night she gets home late, and the old lady yells at her. She says, "You ingrate, never come in to see me." And basically to punish her, she turns her apartment back to the little shithole that it was. I guess it's like quid pro quo. If you don't visit me, all the good stuff's going to end. So the young woman doesn't know what to do. She really likes the way her life has turned out because of the landlady's magic. But she's sick of her. So she decides to kill her. She figures if I kill her before she can, throw a whammy on me, then everything will stay the same. So she does just that. She goes downstairs. She kills the old lady. I really like that panel. It's just grotesque. And then as she's backing up, she knocks over one of her demons in the bottle. And I guess they all fall over like a domino effect. And all these monsters come out. Look at this. That's a fun panel too. And they kill her. When the cops show up, they don't find the young woman's body anywhere. And then as the camera pulls back, we see that her body parts are now in the jars. This is like so much like just a House of Secrets story published by DC. It's not really very underground, but I kind of like the drawing. We have another Two Fools strip by Willie Murphy and Ted Richards. They're back in ancient Rome. They're gladiators, and they're totally incompetent. They get tangled up in their own web. And so a real gladiator comes out to teach them a lesson. He picks them up and whips them out of the Colosseum, all the way out. They go tumbling down the road. They land in this pot of food that this guy was cooking up. They continue to fly through the city. I don't know how they have such momentum. And they land in Nero's palace. We see Nero here playing the fiddle. And they land it looks like on a giant piece of bread. And Nero tastes it and says, mmm. And so I guess it's the first pizza. And the next day, we see the two fools at the Colosseum selling pizza. It's such a bad gag as far as it's set up. Because, there's no words. So, but I mean, like, what the hell is happening? They land in this thing, their pizza, but then they free themselves and start selling it. I don't know. It just seems pretty dopey. But I know I talk about this all the time, but I forgot to mention just how much I love their funny cartooning style. Just perfect funny cartooning. It's like Hunt Emerson or so good. Now we have Barefoots by Howard Cruz. This is a long story about his girlfriend wanting to buy pantyhose. God, I don't know. Maybe there was a pantyhose shortage in the 70s too. But apparently it's like a circus in this department store. All these women are descending to buy the new pantyhose. It's almost like a carnival atmosphere. And once again, completely unfunny. So unfortunate because the craft is amazing. I mean, I hate the way he draws these characters, but just all the background art, really well done. Lettering is flawless. Howard Cruz is so good, except when he draws these characters. I really dislike them. And this is just so not funny. There's so many jokes packed in here, trying to be funny, but they're not at all. At least to me. So now we have The Star Sapphire by Sharon Rudall. Man, I love the way she draws herself. I want to see a photo of her. She's such an interesting face. This is an autobio tale. She tells us that one afternoon she was rummaging through shit at the Salvation Army, and the star sapphire from her wedding ring fell out. So this old lady helps her look for the star sapphire. But meanwhile, she's having flashbacks to how she met her first husband. They were pretty happy. And this is back in the day when, you couldn't live with a boyfriend without marrying them. That was taboo. So she's always got to deal with her parents nagging her, giving her grief about living with a man, living in sin. So finally, the boyfriend says, let's just get married. Shut him up. So they let their wedding date slip again and again. They really don't care. They get the marriage license. But I didn't know this. I guess marriage licenses expire. And if you don't marry before a certain day, you got to do it all over again. So it's the last day. It turns out that they have to be, by some stupid law, they have to be married by clergy or a judge. The fiance says the judges are all booked up. So they basically go on this hunt for any clergyman of any denomination or religion. They go to Chinatown, try to find a Buddhist monk to marry them, but they're all booked. They go to a Russian Orthodox temple, and they basically slam the door in their face. They think the Unitarians will help because they're a very liberal church, but they basically say, you need 2 months in advance plus counseling, and you have to pay us $40. So they go to a temple because Sharon Rudall's Jewish. She thinks they'll be okay. The rabbis kick them out. They're like, it is evil. You must stay within the faith. So they're basically given up. But then Sharon Rudall says, I'm going to try one more thing. And she finds this anti-war priest who has been letting draft dodgers, he's been sheltering them. So they interrupt his dinner, but he marries them. And at first, for a few weeks, she's like, oh, this is great. But then her husband starts being a dick, starts hanging out with all these other people. It seems like he's a swinger. And I don't think Sharon's into that. So now back to the present. She gives up finding the star sapphire. And she says, good riddance to the last relic of my unfortunate marriage. When she gets back to the commune where she lives, it looks like she's already fallen in love with a new guy named Ed. Pretty nice autobiography story. I kind of like that one. So here we have The Wide World of Comics by R. Meltzer. I guess they didn't cancel it, but they pushed it to the back of the comic. And this one's even worse than the other ones, because this is just him commenting on his visit to a New York comic book convention. And it is so badly written. All he basically is just talking about various comics he found. And just mentioning really, like, not even good critiques of these comics. I know he's a hot shit rock critic and he's kind of famous, R. Meltzer, but man, he's a shitty writer, at least in these. It's not funny. I think it's trying to be funny, and it's trying to be really hip and cool, but it's just bad. We get a little barefoot strip at the bottom, and then we have the return of Flip the Bird by John Pound. This one's called Bad Karma. And once again, look at John Pound, just total slick, perfect, funny animal cartoon style. So Flip the Bird notices Sir Francis Bacon, this rich banker, leaving the whorehouse. And he figures he's going to put the touch on him. And he says, basically, give me money. I took photos of you in that whorehouse. I'll show them to your wife and your clients. So Francis Bacon says, fuck you, fine, here's $20, asshole. And then this dog with sunglasses, I don't know if he's supposed to be blind. He's sniffing around Flip the Bird's feet, and Flip the Bird kicks him. And then this little kid is eating an ice cream cone. Flip the Bird steals it and then tries to sell him heroin. And the kid runs off screaming, crying for his mommy. So Flip the Bird says, shouldn't let it go to waste, and he shoots up. So it's so weird how Flip the Bird is just, he's technically the protagonist of the strip, but he's a complete and utter shit. He's a wretched creature. Then he sees a young couple, and he basically fondles the girlfriend and drags her away. Tries to get her to work at the whorehouse, recruit her. And of course the boyfriend's like, I'm gonna kick your ass, motherfucker. And Flip the Bird pulls a knife out, and they get in this huge Warner Brothers cartoon-like fight. And Flip the Bird ends up getting stabbed in the chest, and he falls over dead. The couple just leave. They're like, fuck that guy. Just leave his body there. And then we see this hand bring Flip the Bird back to life. And we don't see him at first. He says, I'm your creator. And Flip the Bird's freaking out. He's like, oh my God, it's God. I'm meeting God. He says, wait a minute, I'm just a cartoonist. I'm your cartoonist. I'm John Pound. So that's John Pound drawing himself there. So Flip the Bird's not listening. He just runs away. He's like, I got to tell everybody. And of course, John Pound's wallet is missing. He's like, come back here. So he goes to all of the people that he abused, or the animals. He tells them the news, and they're like, fuck you. And the little kid says, that bad man here again. And they all start throwing rocks at him. And it looks like they kill him. We see blood dripping from his skull. Good riddance. Now maybe we can have peace at last. I like these Flip the Bird comics, unlike Bugs Bunny, because like Bugs Bunny's a dick. If he was my neighbor, he'd make your life miserable. But he always ends up on top. Flip the Bird is a total dick, but he always ends up getting his comeuppance. So I find these strips very satisfying. Now we have Chapter 3 of We Fellow Traveliers by Justin Green. So the two brothers are still trapped in the basement of the Saw Church of Profanity. And Neurosis, the younger brother, starts crying. For some reason, there's maggots everywhere. So they hear this tapping on the other side of the wall. And they kind of follow it. And they find all of this stuff. So the older brother, he basically says, maybe we can rummage through this and get a clue how to get out of here. I like how his t-shirt says property of Marvel Comics. So right then he steps on a rusty nail. And Neurosis says, you're going to get lockjaw. And he picks up his brother and helps him. And they almost escape from the basement. They find the door. And when they come out, they see this young woman. And she's blind. And she tells them that the caretaker who trapped them in the basement, that's her stepfather. He married her mother, but she says that I have a feeling he married my mother just to get next to me, then bumped her off. So apparently he's in love with his own stepdaughter. And then the caretaker shows up and he threatens them with the shovel. And the stepdaughter conks her stepfather on the head with an umbrella. She's tired of his shit. And the whole time, Neurosis is totally in love with her. His little heart's over his head whenever she talks. She says, guys, jump over the fence. I'm staying. You know, he won't hurt me. He loves me more than himself. And as they're leaving, she gives Neurosis a kiss. And, you know, his ass face that kind of looks like Henry, it magically transformed it into a normal mouth. Well, not so normal. It's kind of weird looking. And they escape. And then the stepfather gives the stepdaughter a spanking. You treacherous little Pollyanna. So Neurosis is running around trying to find help because the lockjaw is getting worse. And his older brother looks like he's going to die. So as the story ends, to be continued, we see Neurosis running frantically around trying to get help. Once again, we have another advertisement for a Comix book, but it's just another great pinup, this time by Peter Poplaski. Look how well drawn this is. It's all the famous artists. There's Toulouse-Lautrec, Vincent van Gogh. This is really nice drawing. And the back cover is that Bill Griffith strip, Claude Funston. He's the character from Zippy the Pinhead. This is almost like an old joke. He goes into a diner. He's got a frog on his shoulder. The cook says, get that thing out of here. And he says, wait, you don't understand. It's a very talented frog. He can stand on his hands. And so he makes the frog do it. And the cook's pretty impressed. And then he's doubly impressed when the frog gives a Black Power salute with his fist. Let's see. Kind of goofy, kind of funny. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed Comix book number 3. This is the last issue Marvel Comics would publish and distribute. I guess it sold like shit. It was terrible. So this experiment was a failure as far as Marvel was concerned. But all of the stories that were planned for number 4 and 5, Marvel was kind of cool for once and just said, you can have them, Dennis Kitchen. And he published them under Kitchen Sink Comics. Published them himself. And we're going to look at those next time. Well, one of them. And so there's 2 more issues still, but this is the last one from Marvel. So I hope you guys liked it, and I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.